Imagine waking up tomorrow and the internet is gone. The banks are closed, the trucks have stopped moving. Within a month, grocery stores are empty. Within a year, your city is a tomb. This isn't some doomsday fantasy. It happened. In 1177 BCE, the entire civilized world just broke. Within a few generations, nearly every major power on Earth vanished, and we still don't know exactly why. The Hittite Empire, a superpower for 5 centuries, controlling most of modern-day Turkey, burned so thoroughly that the fires baked their clay tablets hard as stone in their archives. The Mycenaean Greeks, the legendary heroes of Homer's epics, saw every major city from Mycenae to Pylos consumed by flames. In the Levant, the great cities of Ugarit, Megiddo, and Hazor were reduced to rubble. Egypt, the mightiest civilization of the age, barely survived wave after wave of mysterious invaders they called the Sea Peoples. Raiders who appeared from nowhere, destroyed everything in their path, and then vanished back into historical obscurity. Nobody knows where they came from. They just arrived, and then they were gone. But here's what makes this apocalypse truly terrifying. It happened everywhere, all at once. Within a single generation, the interconnected Bronze Age world, kingdoms that had traded, communicated, and warred with each other for centuries, simply ceased to exist. Archaeological evidence shows massive destruction layers at site after site. The Hittite king's final desperate letters to Ugarit begging for grain shipments were found in the ruins, never answered because Ugarit was already burning. The last king of Ugarit sent his own plea to the king of Cyprus. "My father, the enemy ships are already here. They have set fire to my towns and have done very great damage in the country." Somewhere in Ugarit, a scribe put down his stylus, heard the screams rising from the harbor, and knew this was the end. Think about that. These weren't primitive villages. These were empires with armies, navies, diplomatic networks, and they all fell like dominoes. But here's the kicker. We don't know what started it. Climate change causing mass famine? A series of devastating earthquakes along the Mediterranean fault lines? The mysterious Sea Peoples invasion? Internal rebellion sparked by collapsing trade networks? The evidence suggests it wasn't just one catastrophe. It was a perfect storm of disasters that cascaded across the ancient world. When one civilization fell, it dragged down its neighbors. When trade routes collapsed, cities starved. When armies couldn't be fed, kingdoms crumbled. The world that emerged 300 years later was fundamentally different. Writing systems had been forgotten. International trade had ceased. Population levels had plummeted by as much as 90% in some regions. The Bronze Age didn't just end, it was violently erased from existence. Humanity had to learn how to build civilizations from scratch. But if you think that was bad, if you think the collapse of every major power on Earth was the worst it could get, wait until you see what happened when a volcano erupted with such fury that it literally blew an entire island out of existence, and thousands of people vanished without leaving a single body behind. Around 1600 BCE, a volcanic eruption 4 times more powerful than Krakatoa obliterated an entire island and possibly gave birth to the legend of Atlantis itself. The island of Thera, modern-day Santorini, was a paradise. The Minoans had built a thriving port city there called Akrotiri, multi-story buildings with indoor plumbing, vibrant frescoes depicting dolphins and goddesses, running water, flush toilets, and artistic sophistication that wouldn't be seen again in Europe for over 1,000 years. These people were living the Bronze Age dream. Then, the mountain beneath them woke up. The Thera eruption was apocalyptic in the truest sense. Volcanologists estimate it released energy equivalent to several hundred atomic bombs, ejecting approximately 24 cubic miles of rock and ash into the atmosphere. The explosion was so violent it caused the island's center to collapse into the sea, creating a caldera over 1,000 feet deep. Tsunami waves hundreds of feet high radiated outward near the eruption site at 500 miles per hour, slamming into coastlines across the eastern Mediterranean within hours. But here's the part that keeps archaeologists awake at night. We found the city of Akrotiri perfectly preserved under 60 feet of volcanic ash, frozen in time like Pompeii. It's eerily intact. Pottery still on tables, food still in storage jars, frescoes still brilliant on the walls. But there are no bodies, not one. Thousands of inhabitants vanished. Evidence suggests they evacuated in a hurry, leaving behind their possessions, their food, even their furniture. But here's the question that haunts every researcher who's walked those buried streets. Where did they go? How did they know to flee? Did they have warning tremors? A mother in Akrotiri grabbed her children's hands, looked back one last time at her home with its beautiful dolphin fresco, and ran toward the docks, not knowing the sea itself was about to become a weapon. And what happened to them after they left? The sea was a wall of water, the air was poison, the sky was raining fire. They escaped their homes just to run into the arms of an apocalypse. The devastation extended far beyond Thera itself. On Crete, 70 miles to the south, the mighty Minoan civilization, masters of the Aegean, builders of the legendary palace at Knossos, was shattered. Coastal settlements were wiped out by the tsunamis. Volcanic ash poisoned their crops and choked their harbors. Evidence of massive fire damage appears at Minoan sites across Crete shortly after the eruption. Within a generation, their palaces were abandoned, their writing system forgotten, their trade networks dissolved. The civilization that had dominated Mediterranean culture for centuries effectively ceased to exist. The ash cloud from Thera darkened skies across the entire Mediterranean and beyond. Ice core samples from Greenland show a significant volcanic signal from this period. Tree ring data from bristlecone pines in California and oaks in Ireland reveal a year of severely stunted growth around 1600 BCE, evidence of global climate disruption. Ancient Egyptian records from the reign of Ahmose I describe darkness covering the land and catastrophic storms. Some scholars believe this eruption gave birth to Plato's legend of Atlantis, an advanced island civilization that vanished beneath the waves in a single day and night. If true, the myth remembers a very real apocalypse. But volcanic fury wasn't the only force that could end civilizations. The third apocalypse came not from the earth or the sea, but from the sky itself, refusing to weep. In 2200 BCE, the world's first empire collapsed because it stopped raining, and an estimated 100,000 people simply disappeared into the desert dust. The Akkadian Empire, forged by Sargon the Great around 2334 BCE, was humanity's first multi-ethnic superpower. Stretching from the Persian Gulf to the Mediterranean, it controlled the fertile plains of Mesopotamia, the cradle of civilization itself. For over a century, Akkadian kings ruled from their magnificent capital, Akkad, a city so powerful, so wealthy, that ancient texts described it as the shining jewel of the world. Then, around 2200 BCE, something unprecedented happened. The rains failed, and they kept failing, for 300 years. We're not talking about a bad harvest. We're talking about the complete transformation of an entire region into desert virtually overnight. Modern climate science has confirmed what ancient texts desperately recorded. A megadrought of catastrophic proportions struck the Middle East. Analysis of sediment cores from the Gulf of Oman shows a massive increase in wind-blown dust particles around 2200 BCE. Archaeological excavations at Tel Leilan in Syria, a major Akkadian city, reveal a 2-foot-thick layer of wind-blown dust dating to this exact period. The city was suddenly, completely abandoned. But the horror wasn't just environmental, it was social. This is where history gets ugly. Cuneiform tablets from the period describe scenes that sound like something out of a horror movie. The large fields produced no grain, the flooded fields produced no fish, the watered gardens produced no honey and wine, reads one Sumerian lament. Another chilling text describes mothers eating their own children as famine consumed the land. Archaeological evidence backs this up. Mass graves from this period show signs of malnutrition and violent death. At some sites, bodies were left unburied, a horrifying taboo in Mesopotamian culture, suggesting complete social collapse. An Akkadian farmer watched his wheat turn to dust in his hands, looked at his starving children, and made a choice no parent should ever have to make: stay and watch them die slowly, or flee south and risk dying quickly on the road. The great cities emptied as populations fled south toward whatever water remained. Conservative estimates suggest the northern regions of Mesopotamia lost 75 to 90% of their population within decades. Some migrated, most likely died. The empire's administrative system, dependent on agricultural surplus and tribute, simply ceased to function. Kings in the south tried desperately to maintain order, building massive walls to keep out the climate refugees streaming from the north. Walls that archaeological surveys have confirmed stretched for over 100 miles. They built a wall to stop the refugees. Sound familiar? And here's the kicker. The capital city of Akkad itself, once the glittering heart of empire, vanished so completely that archaeologists still haven't definitively located it. No ruins, no monuments, just references in ancient texts to a city that once was. It's as if the desert swallowed it whole, erasing all trace of humanity's first great imperial experiment. The Akkadian kings had believed they ruled by divine right, that the gods had granted them eternal dominion. Climate destroyed that illusion in less than a generation. The empire fractured into warring city-states, and it would take a century for any semblance of centralized authority to return to Mesopotamia. But if drought could destroy the world's first empire, what could a supervolcanic eruption do to the entire human species? The answer nearly ended us before we even began. 74,000 years ago, a volcano erupted with such violence that it nearly drove humanity to extinction, and genetic evidence suggests we've never fully recovered. This isn't about civilization collapsing. This is about us, the species, almost dying. Mount Toba, located in present-day Sumatra, Indonesia, was not a mountain, it was a sleeping monster. When it finally exploded around 74,000 BCE, it released approximately 670 cubic miles of rock and ash into the atmosphere, making it the largest volcanic eruption on Earth in the last 2 million years. To put this in perspective, Mount Tambora, which caused the year without a summer in 1816, ejected about 9 cubic miles of material. Krakatoa released less than 5 cubic miles. Toba was more than 100 times larger than either, a true supervolcanic event that fundamentally altered the course of human evolution. The eruption column reached 25 miles into the stratosphere, spreading a veil of volcanic ash and sulfur dioxide across the entire planet. Ice core samples from Greenland show massive sulfate spikes from this period, confirming global atmospheric contamination. In India, over 3,000 miles from the eruption site, ash deposits from Toba measure up to 20 feet thick in some locations. Imagine an ash layer taller than a 2-story building, smothering everything beneath it: crops, forests, water sources, entire ecosystems buried under sterile volcanic debris. But the ash was just the beginning. The sulfur dioxide in the stratosphere created a global volcanic winter that lasted between 6 and 10 years. The sun went dark. Temperatures plummeted by as much as 15 degrees Celsius in some regions. Models suggest global average temperatures dropped by 3 to 5 degrees, enough to trigger widespread famine and ecological collapse. Some climate records suggest prolonged cooling effects lasting centuries, with the most severe effects in the first decade following the eruption. But here's where the story gets wild and terrifying. Geneticists discovered something shocking in our DNA, a bottleneck. All humans alive today share an extremely limited genetic diversity compared to other primate species, suggesting our population went through a dramatic reduction in population size. Some geneticists estimate that the global human population may have crashed to as few as 3,000 to 10,000 individuals in the aftermath of Toba. Think about that. 3,000 people, total. A small band of hunters somewhere in East Africa huddled around a fire that wouldn't die, sharing the last scraps of dried meat, watching ash fall from a darkened sky and refusing to give up. We are their descendants. Everyone you've ever met, everyone listening right now, we are all descendants of that tiny, terrified group that refused to die in the dark. Though scientists now debate whether Toba alone caused this bottleneck or if other factors contributed, the evidence of its catastrophic global impact remains undeniable. Archaeological evidence supports the severity of this period. Human artifacts become extremely rare in the layers corresponding to the Toba eruption and the subsequent millennia. Sites that showed continuous occupation before the eruption were suddenly abandoned. When human presence reappears in the archaeological record, it's sparse, scattered, and fundamentally changed. Some researchers argue that only the most adaptable, innovative groups survived, those who could hunt in frozen wastelands, who could develop new technologies, who could cooperate in larger social groups. In other words, Toba didn't just nearly kill us, it may have forced the evolutionary innovations that made us truly human. But humanity's closest brush with extinction isn't even the final apocalypse on our list. The last one came from space itself. Around 10,800 BCE, something from space slammed into Earth with enough force to plunge the planet back into an ice age, and it may have wiped out an entire chapter of human civilization that we're only now beginning to discover. The ice was melting, life was getting better, humanity was spreading across continents, building communities, developing new technologies. The last ice age was finally ending after thousands of years of brutal cold. Then something from deep space hit the atmosphere, and everything changed. The Younger Dryas event has puzzled scientists for decades. After thousands of years of steadily warming climate, temperatures suddenly plummeted. Within a single generation, perhaps within a single decade, global temperatures dropped by as much as 15 degrees Celsius in some regions. Glaciers that had been melting for millennia surged forward again. Forests died. Megafauna like mammoths and saber-toothed cats went extinct. Early human settlements across North America and Europe were abandoned. The cold lasted for 1,200 years before temperatures finally recovered. But what could cause such a sudden, catastrophic climate reversal? One of the most controversial and unsettling explanations may lie in a layer of sediment found at archaeological sites across 4 continents. Dating precisely to 10,800 BCE, this layer contains microscopic diamonds, iridium, platinum, and magnetic spherules, signatures of an extraterrestrial impact. Analysis of ice cores from Greenland shows massive spikes in ammonia and nitrate at this exact moment, consistent with continent-scale wildfires. Sediment cores from multiple locations reveal a black matte layer containing charcoal, carbon spherules, and extinct megafauna remains, evidence of sudden, widespread burning. The Younger Dryas impact hypothesis, first proposed in 2007 and supported by mounting evidence in recent years, suggests that a fragmented comet, possibly originating from the breakup of a larger parent body, struck North America and possibly other locations around 10,800 BCE. While this theory remains debated among scientists, with some researchers questioning the impact interpretation, the physical evidence of the markers themselves is well documented and continues to be studied. Imagine continent-scale wildfires, a flash freeze that dropped temperatures 15 degrees in a decade. The impacts and air bursts would have triggered massive wildfires across entire continents, throwing soot and debris into the atmosphere. The resulting impact winter could have disrupted the Atlantic meridional overturning circulation, the ocean current system that regulates global climate, plunging the world back into glacial conditions. Across the Americas, the Clovis culture, the dominant archaeological culture of Paleo-Indian North America, vanished at precisely the Younger Dryas boundary. Their distinctive spear points simply stop appearing in the archaeological record. Were they wiped out by the impact? The climate collapse? Both? But check this. At Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, an archaeological site that predates Stonehenge by 6,000 years, massive stone pillars carved with sophisticated imagery have been dated to shortly after the Younger Dryas event. One pillar, known as the Vulture Stone, appears to depict astronomical symbols that some researchers interpret as a record of the comet impact itself. A survivor, exhausted, traumatized, but determined, carved images into stone with primitive tools, creating a warning that would last 11,000 years. Ancient humans literally carving a warning about the apocalypse into stone so future generations would remember. 5 ancient apocalypses, 5 times when civilization or humanity itself stood at the brink of extinction. The Bronze Age collapse, the Thera eruption, the Akkadian megadrought, the Toba supervolcano, the Younger Dryas impact. 5 times the lights went out, 5 times we found a way to strike a match. Each one a reminder that our existence is more fragile than we like to believe, that the world we know can end, has ended in ways both sudden and terrible. The ancients survived these catastrophes, rebuilt from the ashes, and carried forward. The question isn't whether another apocalypse will come. The question is, will we be ready when it does? If you want to uncover more mysteries that history tried to bury, subscribe to Dark Dimensions X and hit that bell, because the past has more warnings carved in stone than we ever imagined.